Welcome back to another episode of the Azure Enablement Show. This is the second episode. We're going to talk about the Azure Landing Zone Terraform module. And in this episode, we're going to have a look on how you can start customizing your Azure Landing Zone Terraform module. Welcome back. My name is Thomas, and I'm here with Matt and Kevin from the Azure Landing Zone team. So this is the second episode of the Azure Landing Zone Terraform module mini-series we created. So Kevin, can you quickly recap what we talked about in episode 1 and where we are right now?
Of course, Thomas. So we started off on our default configuration journey. So this was really about how we show the customer to get started with the module. It really kind of gave us a good foundation. So if we can just quickly do a recap on that, I'll just move to the portal and show exactly what we did in that, just to remind everybody. So this was the default configuration page in the wiki. We took this, we went into the Azure portal, and we deployed it. And in terms of what that looks like, it built out a basic management group hierarchy with some policies in it. Now it's a mixture of policy definitions, initiatives, and some corresponding assignments.
So we really addressed how people can get the Terraform module and how they can get started and deploy the basics and where they find the documentation. So Matt, what do you have for us today?
So Thomas, what I'd like to do is take you through some of the deployment options for common platform resources that we do in the module. So we've got a couple of options for customizing deployments, and all the customers that I've ever spoken to want to do this, right? Because nobody is ever the default configuration. So what we are going to look at today is how to configure the module via some input parameters. But before I take you through that, I just want to mention that we actually provide another capability. As well as the input parameters for the module, we've actually got a custom library capability where customers can actually build their own custom archetypes, which is essentially a management group with a set of policies assigned. Customers can build their own archetypes using a template-based format and really take customization to the nth degree. But before we dive into that, what I'd like to do is just show you the wiki. And as we showed you last time, we've got a series of examples down the right-hand side. What I'm going to look at today is the examples of how to deploy the management and connectivity resources. So we can see connectivity resources here on the right-hand side and management resources. So if we look at the management resources first, we'll jump straight to the main.tf file, and we can see the code looks a little like the basic configuration that Kevin showed before. But we've got a couple of extra things that I'd like to point out, and that's these two lines here. So we can see that we've got a toggle called deploy management resources equals true, and then we give it a subscription ID. And when we do that, that's going to do two things. That's going to move the subscription that you supply into the right place in the management group hierarchy. And that's also going to deploy a log analytics workspace and an automation account to enable all of your resources to log their log and metric data into a central location. Likewise, in connectivity resources, we have another example main.tf file, and we can see here that we've got deploy connectivity resources set to true, and we give it a subscription ID. In the same way, that's going to move the subscription ID into the connectivity management group and also deploy a default hub and spoke network. Now, of course, it's going that those IP addresses are not going to be correct for your organization, and we'll come on to how to customize that later. But this is just to give you an idea about how to get started with the basic connectivity and management deployment.
Awesome. So I see there are like a couple of approaches there. Why did you take this approach in this case?
So we wanted to make it easy for customers to customize the deployment based on well-known, well-understood Terraform inputs, but also allow customers who need that extra degree of customization to really go to town on that and really customize to that nth degree.
Makes sense. So, Kevin, shall we jump into a quick demo?
Of course. Let's head back to the portal and we'll have a little look at what our enablement show episode 2 provision looks like. So in the portal, you can see we've got our hierarchies here. I'm going to jump straight into show to now, and we'll have a little look at some of the differences here. So in the previous one, we didn't have any subscriptions moved into here yet. So, when we look to expand this, you could just see the management groups. But now we can start to see some of the changes that have happened. So what we're going to do, we're going to now take this and we're going to go and look at how these changes were implemented. And we're going to look at the code changes that were made to make that happen. Before I do that, though, I'm just going to quickly click into the management subscription. And within here, we can go into the resource groups and take a look at some of the resources that have been provisioned. So we'll have to ignore the demo 3 management here at the moment. We'll focus on demo 2. But this is the example of the resources that you can expect to see as part of enabling management with the defaults. Now, if we have a look at what that looks like in code, very similar to the example that Matt was just showing. What we've done here is we've declared 3 lots of subscription IDs that does the mappings for the subscriptions to know. So this is so the data model within the module knows which subscription ID to use. And this drives a couple of things. It drives some of the policy settings, but it also derives some of the stuff around things like management group placement. But no resources are actually deployed until you set these values to true. So we've got flags for individual things. So deploy connectivity, deploy management, and also deploy identity resources. And these toggle some of the behaviors of policy, as well as controlling whether to deploy resources. But this brings us to another really interesting point about the module. And this is an area which I think is really worth talking about because some customers get stuck on this. In addition to specifying the subscription ID within these inputs so the module knows how to behave for policy and management group placement, we've also opted to provide the option for provider configuration in the module. And this is really the superpower that allows the module to deploy resources into different subscriptions. By default, Terraform will be mapped to a single provider configuration, and that'll be the default configuration. And all resources you try to deploy will go in that one subscription. To allow us to have a single module that's able to deploy resources into different subscriptions for the different contexts, we do the provider mapping. And that's what you see up in this area here, where you see the provider block. And here you'll see we have a default unaliased provider mapped across to the standard provider. Now, this is the provider that will be used for building the management group hierarchy and doing policy operations and role assignments, etc. But specifically, when you want to deploy your connectivity hub into a specific subscription, you need to define a connectivity subscription provider as well, and same for management. Now, this can be a lot to take on. So what we've also done is we've provided documentation for this in the wiki. So if we go back to the wiki and have a look in here, you'll see provider configuration in the menu. And this takes you on a step-by-step guide through how you would actually set that up.
Oh, awesome. Fantastic. Thank you for the demo. So Kevin, if I want to learn more, again, I would obviously watch our next episode as well. But where would people go if they see this episode?
Yeah, so I mean, always the best place to go is to go to the Terraform registry page. And the easiest way to get to that is through our short link, aka.ms/alz/tf. From there, you can get links across to the GitHub repository. And from there, you can get access to all the wiki documentation.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Matt and Kevin. This was fantastic. This was all about how can I customize the Azure Landing Zone Terraform module. And in the next episode, we're going to have a look on the advanced customization of the Terraform module. So everyone watching, thank you very much. Make sure you tune in for the next episode and check out aka.ms/adopt.